Have you ever wanted to take a watercolor class that wasn't just about mixing paint and putting paint on paper? Well, today I've got a treat for you. We were able to attend one of the Daniel Smith watercolor classes at my local brick and mortar David's Art Center in Metairie, Louisiana. And then we were able to interview the owner of Daniel Smith while we were at Creativation. So if you're into the really geeky side of art supplies, I've got a treat for you guys today. Hi, I'm Becca Hilburn. I'm a watercolor comic artist and illustrator. I've been painting with watercolor for about 15 years now, and I am a gigantic art nerd, and I am particularly interested in art supplies with a special focus on comic supplies and watercolor supplies. Today, I have the pleasure of sharing my experiences with Daniel Smith watercolors with you guys today. We've talked about Daniel Smith quite a bit here on the channel, and several of their colors, including Undersea Green, are some of my favorite colors and have a permanent place in my daily driver watercolor palette. So let us go over to David's Art Center for our first class. Hey guys, so we are off to David's Art Center. They are doing a Daniel Smith demonstration, and I want to share as much of that as I can with you guys today. I've attended the Daniel Smith Artist Talk a few times, mostly at Plaza during hands-on creativity over the years, and really the talk is very focused on talking about Primatech watercolors, and there's a special focus on lapis lazuli and synthetic ultramarine. So you guys can see over here on your left is synthetic, and over on your right is natural ultramarine. One of them is derived from mined lapis lazuli, the other one is lab generated and utilizes PB29. And most of the talk was about how they kind of refine the minerals that they've bought to turn them into paints. And they have loads of like mineral samples to kind of give you an idea of the original rock that it might have come from and the paint that resolves from it. I'm going to have some of what we talked about down in the show notes in the description below. And I'm not really going to go super into it because what I found particularly interesting was the thing we talked about the least was how they generate some of their super granulators like Shadow Violet and Moon Glow. We also had the opportunity to swatch several colors from, they went around and did dots of fresh watercolor paint, and we had the chance to swatch them, ask questions, and they answered questions as well. All in all, it was a really pleasant afternoon, and I really enjoyed getting to attend this again, and I appreciate David's Art Center for thinking to invite me. We really enjoyed our time at the Daniel Smith demo. I've got a bunch of handwritten notes that I can't wait to share with you guys. Unfortunately, we have to jet because it is time to go get registered for NAMTA. So we are again at NAMTA with Daniel Smith, but you are not actually Daniel Smith. Who are you?
I'm John Coffey, the owner of Daniel Smith.
And what unique thing do you bring to the table? Because you told us before you weren't an artist, you're a...
Computer science.
No, my husband's a computer scientist. That's so cool.
So I've been with the company for 34 years.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, great company.
That means you have seen a lot of stuff over the years.
Seen a lot of stuff. Been able to be involved in the development of a lot of the different colors. Certainly the watercolors. Materials that go with the watercolors, for example, the grounds. We just made our newest foray into the gouache.
Yeah.
So we have watercolor gouache, and it's made with the same binder, gum arabic, same pigment, just a higher pigment load.
Yeah.
So very,
it's
very
beautiful
neat.
too.
In terms of minerals. We're very unique in that we take the minerals. From the mineral, we make pigment. From the pigment, we make paint. And it has just unbelievable granulation. So for those artists that love the granulation, it's actually quite beautiful. And then for those that are realist artists that don't want granulation, we have those colors as well. So for the professional artists or artists that wants to choose, in particular their colors, we have that option covered.
So what is the new thing that my viewers should know about? The new hotness?
Well, the new thing that we have, the newest thing, is the gouache. And it's interesting in that it can be put down in mass tone, which is different than the watercolors. Mm-hmm. And you could actually, if you wanted to leave effects, you could have brushstroke effects. So it's a different way to bring your water media experience. This is a water media versus a watercolor. While it's very similar, this actually will have a different look for your painting. Yeah. Which is awesome. It's kind of neat just to do two side by side.
Yeah, it really is to see how different they are. Yeah. And we do a lot of mixed media because I'm a comic artist. So I love introducing gouache into my watercolors to bring back that opacity or to add that rim lighting. And your titanium buff or buff titanium, the watercolor was so great for adding that to darker skin tones. So I'm really excited about it in a gouache because it's going to make it a little bit easier for me to handle and get that opacity built up. So how many colors are in the gouache line?
Right now we have 71.
That's a good range.
74.
And are you guys planning on expanding the gouache line at some point?
Probably at some point. Gouache started because it was a way to take pictures for advertising, and so used in cartoons. It's a design media. Yeah, very much so. So right now we're getting a lot of feedback from our brand ambassadors on how they're using it. So if we do need to increase it, we'll increase it. It won't get anywhere. That makes sense. It won't be even half as many as the watercolors.
Right, but for gouache also, because I believe during the workshop on Saturday, you mentioned that your gouache is just pigment and gum arabic, right?
Yeah, it's just a lot more, it's a heavier pigment load than our watercolor, but it's the same pigment, right? The same gum arabic or binder. So you can use them together.
But like you mentioned it on Saturday, well, kind of hinted at it, some of these would just not work particularly well as a gouache because they're not going to have that opacity.
Yes, it deals with the pigment. And there's quite a few pigments we can make opaque, but there's others there's just no way.
Yeah. So these were specially formulated then from pigments that were suited for a gouache use to really work well as a gouache.
They're actually the same exact pigments we use for watercolor, and we tested the most popular in terms of the formulation for the gouache, and just to see if it would work. And the ones that worked were brought out, and the ones that died,
makes perfect sense. Yeah. So instead of there being a subpar product, they're going to be all knockouts. Yeah. So you can count on them to perform consistently time and time again.
God, you're good. I like you. Yeah. So the alizarin crimson is very different in the watercolor than it is in the gouache.
I love alizarin crimson, but I love how rich and deep this got. So if I watered this down a bit like a watercolor, would it perform more like these properties or more like the watercolor?
If you watered it down a lot, you would get to almost the same place as a watercolor because it is just more pigment. So you not really want to do that because there's just a lot of marbles as a watercolor you have to have in your head. Yeah. And once you learn how the alizarin crimson acts with other things, you probably want to keep that knowledge over here and just use
the gouache as a gouache. Makes sense.
And you can certainly use them together to highlight different areas, etc.
They are beautiful. I know David's carries this because I've been kind of eyeballing them.
They do.
So that is really exciting. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Yeah. I know my viewers are going to be real. Oh, you have a question? Sorry.
Yes. Which color of gouache is your favorite?
My favorite probably is going to be the same in watercolor as it is in the gouache. And it's not a super fancy color. My favorite is ultramarine blue.
That's a classic, though. That's
Yeah.
such a
It's just
good blue.
beautiful. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful blue. And it's a beautiful blue in watercolor.
I think of it as like Louisiana high summer sky blue.
Oh, yeah?
So I love that color too. Good choice. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really
you're both
appreciate
very
it.
welcome.
And I definitely appreciate getting to see the gouache swatches.
Which is your favorite color?
You know, that's a really good question because I'm kind of torn because I really love the lavender here. And I am actually thinking of it differently than what I would be picking for a watercolor because I'm thinking about it as like, what would I want to add some lightness to? What would I want to bring some of that like highlight back into? So also some of the yellows, because when I'm painting foliage to add that rim light, that would be so nice. And then I'm a sucker for olive green too.
See, I'm torn because I think
That
phthalo
is
blue
beautiful.
turquoise
Yeah.
and cobalt teal blue
I know.
are both
That's a
incredible.
beautiful color.
It is. Both in
Phalos
water-
are great. We call those like the loud person at the party. You know, in the watercolor world, they're highly stainy, but they're also very vibrant.
Yes.
They're good mixers.
They
too.
are.
I mean,
Yeah.
they tend to take over.
They are
but
strong.
Yeah, a little goes a long way
A little
with the
goes a long
phalos.
way.
Something I think is interesting is you're offering Moon Glow as a opaque medium, as a gouache, and it's beautiful color, and it's so different from the beautiful granulation that we get
is.
with the watercolor. I
Yeah.
mean, Moon Glow as a granulating watercolor is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I love it for comic backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's so good for like creating atmospheric effects. And this is just such a beautiful, dark, midnight kind of like dark, cloudy evening
way,
kind of
way
beautiful
different
color.
than the watercolor.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gorgeous. And then the neutral tint. I mean, you gotta love a good neutral tint.
Yeah.
Is this designed to be mixed with the other colors to kind of subdue it and shadow
Yeah.
it down? Perfect. Because I mean, that's what neutral tint is designed for.
That's what it's designed for. Neutral tint, Payne's gray, Payne's
Yeah.
blue gray.
Love all of those for grise
Yeah.
effects.
Oh, and you've got Jane's black, both shades of them.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how that looks with the granulators, right? How different and how like soft and velvety they are in gouache.
And how dark the iridescents are.
I know, that's really pretty.
It's almost like acrylic.
Which is really difficult. We had to spend a lot of time here because you can actually have
Ooh,
the
that's so
iridescents go
pretty.
away. So it's getting it to be opaque because they're transparent to begin with. So to create a transparent into an opaque and not have that beautiful mica property go away.
Do you want to hear a dumb admission?
Yeah.
Do you know how opaque these are? I thought these were just swatches until you pointed out,
Oh yeah, it's white.
and then I
black.
realized you're covering the black.
Yeah.
That is amazing. That's such, and is that one just good swatch? No.
Yeah, because you can do these in mass tone.
Yeah, that coverage is impressive.
Yeah.
I know that's something a lot of gouache artists sort of struggle with is getting that coverage, and then they have to repaint it, and it turns to mud. So these really pack up oomph.
And
Can
the
they
big
be?
difference is that these are watercolor gouache.
Yeah, not acrylic. Yeah,
gouache.
yeah, which is I prefer watercolor gouache over acrylic gouache because I love that slight reactivability.
It makes them really usable between the two.
And also, I don't wreck my brushes.
Exactly, right? Because we're using our watercolor brushes with our gouache sometimes. Could one set up the gouache in half pans, or should we use them straight from the tube?
They are rewettable,
Nice.
so you could.
Okay, because I got cats, so that's what's easier for me.
So they're on the back of your 266 dot card.
We saw that, yeah. I'm gonna be swatching those.
So you should be able to re-wet them quite easily. They are going to be higher pigment load. Higher pigment load. You might have to wake them up a little bit.
Oh, I always do anyway. Want to give all my colors the best chance possible.
Yep.
That's really, because that makes it so much, I work smaller, and that makes it so much more accessible for those of us who do work smaller, that we're not, you don't want to waste paint,
No.
And when you do a squirt on a palette and you paint small, that's going down the drain. Or
It's also a great way of, and no one's ever tried it before, and giving demonstrations to artists. Artists are like the most creative people that walk the face of the earth. They'll say, if I want to travel with my colors, instead of having TSA give me issues, I just squirt them on a piece of paper, say what they are, and now it's just my colors on a piece of paper that I can bring anywhere with me.
Yep, the
And I
same
just
with
put-
your sticks too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Believe me, I've been through TSA with tubes.
Or
and
wear them on their wrist and just take the color
I
off the
love
wrist.
that idea. That
Yeah.
is cool.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to do artist jewelry where it's little glass pods and we can do our
Yeah,
and that way we can show it off.
They just take pieces of watercolor paper
Yeah.
and put a hole, and then
And then
wear
they
it through
wear
a
it
bracelet.
like that.
Yep, and take it off as they're using it, so they could be
That
in the middle
is-
of anywhere and have
yeah.
enough to do a painting.
You know, I've seen people take the pill containers and make them into
There you go.
rings. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. It's so exciting. Thank you
You're
again
welcome.
so much for taking
It's
the
a
time to
pleasure.
talk to us.
Thank you, everybody.
So it's been a couple days since the Daniel Smith demo at David's, and we also had a chance to talk to John at Creativation. So I'm going to include that interview here in case you guys find that interesting. What I find interesting is companies often have a different approach when talking directly to artists as opposed to when they're talking to companies. And I mean, as an artist, I do prefer the artist talk. We had a lot of fun swatching and a lot of fun trying out different colors and getting to see the pigments. So we left the class with a dot sheet with some pretty substantial dots on here. We left with the Princeton Aqua Elite watercolor, as well as a stick of ultramarine blue. We also left with boo-hoo dot sheets, including their gouache. And I'm actually going to hold on to these because I really want to get back into doing streams with you guys again. And I think doing little dot card streams would just be super chill for everybody. So that's kind of the direction I want to move in for things like that. We also received an informational pamphlet about Primatech. And I just want to point out, this isn't a critique. This isn't a review. We went to a class and we conducted an interview. So I am just here for the good vibes and to enjoy myself. We also, and I did actually take notes through this. This one might, yeah, I was like, where are my notes? There are my notes. And then in addition to really generous dot card sheet and the watercolor stick and the watercolor brush, we also got Daniel Smith aprons, and I hadn't opened mine yet. Now, as an art supply nerd, I love this kind of art supply swag. So very cute. It even has a brush or a pencil pocket, and then two nice sizable pockets as well. So I really enjoyed being able to take this class. I've actually taken it several times. I used to take it every year that Plaza offered it as part of Hands-On Creativity. And when the owners of David's Art Supplies asked if I would be interested, I definitely said yes. And it was really neat to be able to see so many other area artists. In fact, I don't know if I mentioned this, so I'll mention it now. It was the same weekend as Creativation, and it was a really interesting juxtaposition because sometimes in Louisiana, we have a hard time meeting other artists. Louisiana and New Orleans, in a way, kind of picks the artists they want to champion, and everyone else kind of fights for scraps. So it was kind of cool to be in a room with so many other people, some whom I met before, some who I've never met, some who are new to watercolor, some who have been doing it for years, some who paint for pleasure, some who teach. I wish I didn't have a bad migraine that day because I would have loved to have been able to chat more just casually with other people. And unfortunately, the migraine kind of held me hostage. But I enjoyed this opportunity. And so the Daniel Smith thing, the class at David's, sorry, I'm getting a migraine again. So if I'm messing words up, you guys know why. Actually, sometimes when I'm recording these things, I have to do it with my eyes closed to kind of cut down on the external stimulation so I can focus on what I'm saying. So the Daniel Smith thing at David's, all local artists, okay? The Creativation, I think there was like one other local artist. Like I was walking around as just like a digital content creator, YouTuber person, right? The only other Louisianian I met was doing the Holbein demos, and they were from Gretna. It's kind of weird to me that Creativation was in New Orleans, but so many companies imported their artists for demonstrations rather than sourcing artists from New Orleans. So I know my own art supply store plugged for me because they put me in contact with someone, and that kind of fell through because they found somebody from Alabama that they preferred to work with, and that's fine. But like, I do think that it would have been cool to meet more Louisiana artists, and sometimes it can feel kind of lonely here. So the Daniel Smith class at David's was really nice for that. It was a room full of artists, and it really reminded me that there are a bunch of watercolorists in the greater New Orleans area. Like, we're not even talking Lafayette or Baton Rouge or Houma. We're talking like just the greater New Orleans area. And I kind of don't see that when I go to shows because it's mostly acrylics and oils who are selling at craft fairs, not necessarily watercolorists. So it was nice. And maybe hosting a social of some sort would be a cool direction to go in to get to meet some other artists in the area, maybe on a day when I don't have a migraine. But I enjoyed my experience. If you have the opportunity to take this class, it's not a class in like this is how you use watercolor class. It's a class for art supply nerds. So like, these are what the materials are made of. This is what our binder is. Play around with these things. Ask us some questions. Let's talk about the materials that we use to make these paints. It was that kind of a class, which if you just want to learn how to watercolor, it's not going to be for you, but I enjoyed it. And I am interested in the nerdy side of art supplies. So a big thank you to John with Daniel Smith for hosting this class at David's Art Supply and for allowing us to interview him while he was at his booth at NAMTA and for showing us so many really cool things. I genuinely appreciate the time that he took to show us things and to encourage our enthusiasm and to share some of his favorite new products as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you guys will stick around for more art manufacturer interviews as part of my NAMTA series. If you're new here, make sure you click the subscribe button and hit the bell notification so that YouTube will let you know when we have another update. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to seeing you guys again soon with another art supply review, tutorial, artist vlog, or artist/art manufacturer interview. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye!